Hi, nice to see you all today. I have had a few thoughts buzzing around in my head, which is sometimes a good thing and sometimes a bad thing. And I never am quite sure of how they're going to work out. So let's do this together and see what happens. I thought that if we put some fabric paint, which is the blue and the yellow, onto a sheet of glass with some extender, which is very transparent base that fabric paint is made out of. I've dotted it on here, and the reason why I've used the extender is so that my paint will soften up as I'm spreading it. I'm hoping to try and do a marbling technique, so let's see what happens. So I'm wanting to use a skewer now to drag my color up and down on the glass, and as I'm doing this I'm pulling the colors through the others that are already on the glass so that they are starting to mix. I'm going to need to do this a few times, as you can see, just to cover the whole board, but it won't take terribly long. And I think the lovely thing about marbling is that traditionally you would do this on a base of sphagnum moss, which you would mix with water. You can also use things like shaving cream as a base, or you could actually use things like wallpaper paste, and they all have their pros and cons. So I'm just simply doing this left to right to begin with, dragging the colors through each other, and you'll see that I'm gradually filling up the glass as I'm doing this. I'm wanting then to get a print out of this. So having gone in one direction, I'm now going to work in another direction, and I've put this piece of brown paper underneath because I do quite a lot of paper crafts. And my thought was, is when I'm finished, I could probably use these colors on the brown paper and maybe do a project with them. I'm not too sure. But you can see now that the colors are starting to blend together quite nicely, and I'm filling up my sheet of glass. I don't really want to have too many gaps in between, because that will just show as a blob of no color on my print that I'm going to do. So the reason why I've chosen this turquoise blue and the yellow is because blue and yellow make green. And I knew that by working with just two colors on the color wheel, that I wasn't going to end up with a huge muddy mess. So that is my choice of just having the two. And as I said, the extender, which is the colorless base that the fabric paints are made with, that is just to make the paints a little bit more creamy and to help them spread more easily. So I'm just moving up and down, gradually covering my whole board. I have got on here far more paint than I actually need, but you will see that when I actually lift my print up, that I will be able to just scrape the excess off. The color from the extender, excuse me, should I say the lack of color in the extender is gradually being replaced by color as it's blending with the actual fabric paints. And you can see now I've got a really nice combination of the blues and the greens. I'm going to start working in the opposite direction here, just dragging lines up and down. I remember as a child going into a bakery and looking at these cakes that had this marvelous marbled pattern on and thinking, oh my word, that looks so beautiful. How do they do that? And this is exactly how they do it. They put on lines of different color icing, and then they just drag a skewer or a toothpick or some kind of baking, I don't know, one of those things that you use to test if your cakes are baked. What are those prong things? And then they would just drag the colors through. So you can see here what I'm doing is just finishing it off nicely. My glass is just about covered. I'm just going to do a little bit more in the center here just to get a bit more. And I'm not too worried that my colors are crisscrossing, because the more you crisscross, the more interesting your patterns get. Just make sure that you cover the whole of your surface in the same direction. I suppose you could do swirls and things if you wanted to as well. Yeah, so I'm just going to do this way once more. And I think just for good measure, I'm just going to add in a little bit of extender here and here, because I don't really want to have a dry kind of spot in the middle of my design. So the extender will just make this a little bit more fluid to move around. So let me just do opposite direction again, just to spread the color. You often found this kind of marbling technique on the inside of book covers. They would decorate those old manuscript books so beautifully with these hand decorated papers using this marbling technique. And it's really beautiful. And when you've seen them perhaps on a video doing this with large sheets of paper, you can really recognize the skill that is needed to be able to do that. Right, I think I'm ready to go. So what I've got here now is some cotton fabric that I've pre-washed, and I'm now going to take this cotton fabric and make a U shape, place it over my sheet of glass and gently just lower it down onto the surface. You then want to just pat on the top so that you're actually picking up the pattern. If the surface of your fabric is not in contact with the paint, you are not going to pick up the color. So you want to just pat that, make sure that you get as much of the paint up as possible. And if you see any spots that look very white, then you'll know that probably there's a bit of dryness underneath. So you want to just go over that. I haven't got the paint right to the edge of my fabric, so I will be aware that that will be a slightly dry spot. Right, when I pick this up, you're going to see that there's an enormous amount of paint on the actual surface. So what I'm going to do is just move my glass out of frame for now, and I'm going to pick up my fabric and I'm going to lay this down on the piece of paper so you can see it. There's my yummy piece of glass which still has paint on it, so I can do another print, but I'm for now going to set that aside. And then you want to take one of these old store cards that you no longer use, just one of these plastic cards, and you're just simply going to work away from you so you can pull and drag your paint off to the side. I've just got a little container here that I'm going to put it into and move it off. So immediately you can see that you've got a nice selection of colors on your design, but the paint isn't going to be thick and grungy when you leave it to dry, so it will dry fairly quickly. The important thing with fabric paints now is that once you've set this aside to dry, you must make sure that you iron it on the back with a hot dry iron once you've finished, and this will ensure that the paint is set into the material so that it's permanent and can be washed. Yeah, thanks for the patience of watching me swirl this paint around, wondering what was going to happen. I think that I'm very happy with this. It's a lovely subtle background and you would easily be able to stencil over this. So I hope you've had fun, and please look at the thumbnail because there'll be other examples for you there too. Bye for now.